On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk about Sonos and the lessons to be learned on keeping customers happy, Ring's new AI-enabled smart video search tool, client demands, and more. This is ResiWeek episode 453, Unforced Error. Welcome to ResiWeek for Monday, October 14th. I'm Patrick Norton, hosting for Matt Scott, who is off celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving, which I'd like to point out to our producer Mitchell, has a Wikipedia entry, which doesn't guarantee it's a real thing, but is a strong indication. So happy Thanksgiving to Matt and the rest of Canada. And for the Quebecois listeners, Joyeuse Action de Gras, which is probably insulting since my French pronunciation is so atrocious. And now that I've guaranteed a flood of angry email in French with a .ca address, let's get to introducing our guests. Joining us today are Jeremy Glowacki, Residential Tech Today's executive editor, and Livewire's founder and CEO, Henry Clifford. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on ResiWeek.
Great to be with you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You know, it's funny. It's not the heaviest week in AV news, but it's a good week for discussing everything from customer trust to AI. What exactly AI is? Does AI have any meaning when you're facing consumers and customers? And of course, hurricanes. And our thoughts go out to everyone that's been impacted by Helene and Milton in the past few days. And having gone through several hurricanes with my folks, I'm glad to say that their house was not hit. But I know what it's like when your house is hit, especially when you don't expect it. So our thoughts go out to everyone out there. Shifting to not so much a more cheerful subject, Jeremy, Henry, let's talk about Sonos and their plan to re-earn customer trust, which is not nearly as desperate a situation as a hurricane. But I'm going to let Jeremy use the phrase we were discussing in pre-show, and I'll say, "Wow, way to shoot yourself in the foot and wipe out a staggering amount of customer loyalty in just a few poor decisions." Gentlemen, are you dealing with any of the fallout from Sonos personally or professionally, or is it something that you just kind of stare at from a distance and thank goodness it wasn't you making those decisions?
Well, personally, I don't use the Sonos app a whole lot. I typically stick with Spotify, and I have Sonos for products that I use, but I don't typically, I don't have a Sonos house. So it didn't hit me personally when the app, was rebooted and took away a lot of features like I heard all about. And I know that the Sonos customer base was hit hard by that. And frankly, when I went to CEDIA Expo and I went to the Sonos booth, I thought, man, this place is going to be like pitchforks and torches and that type of thing. And I was surprised that, like some of these companies that are big, that they had like fans galore. You know, you're talking about professional integrators at this booth, enjoying the free beverages and everything else, and there didn't seem to be sweaty executives at the booth, answering questions. I think they'd been through it already. Their push at the show was a commercial speaker. I thought that was interesting. It just kind of was like a redirect from what that consumer feel was. But I think the term we used was unforced error. It was for sure that, how could you roll this out and not have it beta tested and ready to rock? And now all of these things that they're listing in this article about, needing to review things before they go public, that type of thing. It's all a basic, and we'll go to another sports term, blocking and tackling that companies usually do. And I find it really shocking that that's not the way this was done, and that they need to set up new policies, or at least make the customer base feel like they're going to be better next time, which I guess you got to do for, your shareholders, that type of thing. But it definitely was.
I would say continued survival.
Yeah.
Shareholders are good, but shareholders also prefer the company's still around.
Yeah, for sure. Survival is the right word.
Henry, any thoughts on what's going on with Sonos and taking care of customers when you're doing major software upgrades?
It's interesting. I think this update came out in May-ish, and this stock was trading at like $17 a share, and the stock's kind of hit a low. It seems like it's coming back up, but Yeah, it's like $12 a share. But I don't know. It's been 6 months since this update was pushed, and it was immediately apparent to me. I have Sonos in my house, and I was just gobsmacked. And I come from a software background. I just can't imagine. In software, there's usually 4 environments for screwing around with your software. You've got development, and then if it looks good in development, you push it into um, test. If it looks good into test, you push it into stage. So there's like 3 or 4
Right.
opportunities, and then you push it into production. And I'm just trying to imagine the focus group, or maybe non-focus group, that said, "Oh yeah, this is great." Or, I mean, they had to be key executives who were living with Sonos, who were testing this new app. For the first second, I was like, "You mean I can't cue a song? I can't choose play net? Like, these are all basic things in Sonos that you're able to do." And I would describe it as Sonos was perfect. It didn't need fixing. There
Right.
was nothing broken. So I just, yeah, I struggle because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I think they struggle because it's publicly held, and there's certain things you can say and can't say. And I haven't put myself in a position to have an awkward conversation because I'm like, what's the point?
True.
When they could just get themselves in trouble, and I don't want to, put them in that spot. But yeah, I struggle. Unforced error is absolutely the way to state it. The fact that some of this stuff has come 6 months late, um, it's certainly a case study. I mean, I'm imagining there'll be a case study on this somewhere of what not to do.
Yeah, the Harvard Business School, analysis.
Yeah, I think the challenge for me is like, well, it's easy for you to say, do you have a better idea? And oftentimes I will keep my mouth shut when I don't have a better idea. But in this case,
Right.
I've actually, on a much smaller scale, had to deal with bad situations like this. And, 6 months is about 5 months and, 2 weeks too long to deal with some of this stuff. I mean, you don't need 6 months to come out with a plan to have an ombudsman. Like, I read about having an ombudsman. That was like something I read in my like textbook of PR crisis
Right.
communications in in the 90s. So this is day late, dollar short. I love the guys. They're nice. And they feel, here's the irony. If you had them all on this show right now and asked them how they felt, they would all say the same thing. And so nobody's going to tell the story from the perspective of being the aggressor or the villain. It's always going to be from the perspective of being the victim. So it's just a bad situation. I hope they push through it. I believe in the hardware. I think that's why you didn't see the angry mobs at Cedia,
Right.
because they know once you fix that software stack, we're through it. But in the interim, I've seen very tactical behavior for some of my brothers and sisters in CI who are like, all right, well, I'm going to shift over here.
And so this was all started because of the Ace headphone rollout. And I was talking
Yeah.
to an integrator friend of mine who said, you know, obviously that's a profit center. Everyone needs a successful headphone product for the tune of $449. They're pretty pricey relative to, other consumer products. But he was saying, what would have been a great application for these? Because here's a product that's supposed to link to, a sound bar, and it's of course this one specific sound bar to where you can come, have it hop on and off and that type of thing. But he said, I have aging clients who one of them is hard of hearing, and it would be great if they could have their Sonos Ace headphones on, the sound bar is working for the, he said it's always the husband that's deaf. So it's like the wife is sitting there listening in the room, and then the husband's got the headphones on, and they don't have to
Right.
screw around with the volume. And he's like, it doesn't work that way. It would have been a great option and something so nice to have thought through when, you're having all of these other issues that were unforced errors, and you didn't even solve something that could have been solved at that time.
I mean, that could at least be a follow-up, right? Because I can't imagine that the audio routing is that complex if they couldn't actually manage to simultaneously hit a sound bar and the headphones. I mean, as somebody who's watched them from the consumer side, it was interesting. Sonos was incredibly enmeshed in making their customers happy. They went public, they wanted to make more revenue. Patrick Spence took over as CEO and radically elevated the product release cycle. Everything I've heard internally, and conveniently, take what is posted in various forums or Reddit, with however many grains or salt blocks you want to, but a lot of people who were summarily dismissed or laid off after this debacle pointed out that they were obsessed with shipping the headphones and they were going to do whatever it took to ship the headphones on time. And there were a lot of internal warnings. In fact, a lot of tools that are in place for people with disabilities were eliminated until the last minute when a huge ruckus went up internally. There was certainly, by all accounts, a lot of internal noise that this was a bad idea. Um, and they made the bet that I guess the glory of the headphones was going to radically outweigh the problems with the existing customer base. Lost that bet. I mean, it's funny, Henry, you mentioned that everyone needs to have a headphone, and it's been interesting. Ever since Beats came out, there's been this obsession with a 300, and then later on, like I think, watching Focal and some of the others really pump the prices on headphones up. And it's been fascinating to watch that even this late, people think that three, four, $500 headphones are going to be this magnificent source of revenue, and they aren't at this point because there's too many of them out there, and they've been out there for too long. And if you don't offer, switching between a sound bar and a headphone is one thing. I'm not sure if it's a $500 or $600 something for the average consumer, but um, I look forward to seeing if they back up all of their talk and their mea culpas. I felt really bad for some of their public facing people in Reddit and other places who have absorbed a huge amount of abuse um, from angry clients. But yeah, I have a ton of Sonos in my home. I've been an enthusiast for a long time, and certainly riding this out. It didn't impact me a lot of what I do with it because I use Rune and other third party apps extensively. But where it did, it was incredibly frustrating.
Well, it's interesting too, Patrick. You mentioned third party.
Yeah,
With the latest gen Sonos gear, it all is capable of AirPlay. And I think if you want to
yeah,
really see where tech's heading, watch children and teenagers interacting with the technology, and I'll tell you all you need to know. Even with the Sonos app working on a good day, my children have no interest in learning how it works or any of that stuff.
sure.
They'll use either the voice or the native
Yeah,
layer on the iOS device, and that's how they're doing it. And so they they,
yeah.
they view it as nothing more than an empty socket, an empty AirPlay socket, and they don't care what that hardware. So I wonder what that means for the future of maybe AV amplifiers to begin with.
Oh, I don't think you're the only one. I mean, when you look at fairly high-end companies that are, on one hand, making sure they're working with Room, which is a fairly high-end audiophile platform, and Spotify, which is definitely not a high-end audiophile platform. There's certainly, I think, the industry is aware. It's funny to watch people's interpretation. I mean, I will also say on the audio side, I once had. A rep from a company told me they had a fantastic system that was just right there in the sweet spot for entry level Gen Z buyers. And the CD player and amplifier were $13,000 with no speakers. And I thought to myself, I don't know who you're talking to in Gen Z, but I don't think this is the knock it out of the park win that you think you've got going here.
They wouldn't know what a CD was. Yeah, they'd think it was a coaster. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I will admit to having viciously trained my children to find the high settings on Spotify and trust the media, the hard copies of media for the stuff they really love. Um, we'll see how that ends up in the next few years. Um, Jeremy, you're a Ring user. You posted Ring is adding a new AI-enabled smart video search tool to restechtoday.com. Is it AI? Are you excited?
So yeah, I am a Ring customer and I tried to get away from it and I and I sampled a few other products that came along that, for various reasons were not acceptable. And I think a lot of it came down to not having a hardwired option for my home and trying to make that work, couldn't make it work. And so battery, rechargeable, hot swappable batteries would like kind of like the only thing that works for me. And a lot of these other solutions out there, you got to take if it's a battery doorbell, you have to take it off to charge it, which makes no sense at all. So back to Ring, I see where this feature could be very useful. It's playing video back using AI to search for things using sort of large language, I guess, models, sort of common words, you know, find
Visual language modeling.
like an example I think was something like show me a squirrel running across the porch or something. I don't know, and it'll search for that. I think that there are probably options, reasons to have that. They are charging more for it as a service. So on top of already, paying for your storage fees, they're going to add this other level of fee. I wouldn't want to do that. I'm pretty cheap when it comes to adding service that I don't like, recurring, fees on tech that I use as if I can avoid them.
Jeremy, the revenue, the ongoing rental
I
revenue.
know, I know.
Just because you've bought the product doesn't mean you don't have to stop paying for it.
I
If you're not watching the video right now, there's a lot of smiling going on in
I
various screens.
I tried so hard to not pay for my Ring after I reinstalled it, and I went on a trip, and I thought, I don't like that I can't check every now and then on a package or whatever on my front porch. So that's why I do it. I fortunately live in an area where security is not the issue, so I don't need a home security system. It's more about checking on what's sitting there on the porch and let my neighbors know I
Sure.
need them to grab it for me. So I do like that. I had a recent conversation about AI at Cedia and when it's part of marketing and when it's real. And I realized this is actually an application of AI that I think is real, and I think that's great. We're finding ways to make things more efficient, to help the end user get to the solution they want. In this case, making sure that they can locate something that happened without having to scroll back through a history.
If you've never scrolled through streaming video online, it can be a really slow, arduous, and irritating experience. So I can see where a lot of people would certainly be excited about this one. Is it a is it a spendy monthly upgrade or is it a incremental?
Yeah, it was an additional 19.99 per month for premium subscribers. So you're already paying. I forget what that premium fee is, but you're adding a $20 a month fee. Again, certain people that's not going to matter. It's going to be nothing. But
Sure.
to me, that is just on top of all the other streaming services and things that are they all add up, and for this, I don't need it. I wouldn't need it that often. I don't think to rationalize having that
Right.
extra fee, but I like that they're using technology in a smart way, to help make life easier for consumers. Could it have been a throw in for your premium subscription? I think that would have been a nice touch, but hey, business models.
Amazon started charging to keep ads out of Prime, so obviously they need
There
the
you
money
go.
from all divisions at this point. Henry, you're not a now you're an integrator on commercial and residential. You're not a huge fan of Ring. Did you want to talk about some of the options out there, or why you find Ring kind of frustrating, or you just don't want to give Amazon anything more than it already has in you beyond, say, your Prime watching habits and deliveries?
I just think that in our industry where we're messaging constantly the importance of building up recurring revenue in our businesses, helping another entity building up their recurring revenue seems counterintuitive. I also feel like there's a little bit of separation in church and state there that to me is important. I look at an outfit like alarm.com, which was founded out of MicroStrategy, data sciences company, takes privacy really seriously. And again, I'm sure Amazon takes privacy really seriously too. But I guess I'd rather buy my socks from the sock store and my earth moving equipment from the earth moving equipment store. So I like there's a little bit of separation. But I will also say I'm subjective on this subject. I mean, I have a stake in selling designing, selling, and servicing security systems that are powered by the cloud platform like alarm.com. I have repeatedly asked the Ring people about RMR opportunities for our industry. And I feel like there's plenty of integrators out there who are perfectly happy going in and setting up Ring devices and making clients happy and just being transactional. That's just not a fit for us. I don't see the logic in that. Just feels like a hamster wheel that never ends. But so it doesn't mean that Ring is not successful, incredibly successful. I mean, this was a Shark Tank pitch from an outfit called Doorbot, I think, 10 years ago. I mean, that's a hell of a story. So I have nothing against, I think his name's Jamie Siminoff, and what he's done. And he exited with Amazon. Good for him. And objectively has clearly made a great product because it's now like a Kleenex type buzzword. Right. I mean, people don't say video doorbell. They say Ring doorbell, just generically. So, but I have to decouple that and say, well, yeah, sure. But as for me and my people, we choose to monetize our subscription services through offerings like alarm.com.
I think it's interesting that the two stories we've led with here are these two brands that have transcended the custom integration, no brand recognition kind of model where so much of what we do, it's like, no, I'm Glowalkie integration. That's the system I put in. The brands aren't something you need to worry about. I stand by what we put in. But here are two things where you talk to your average consumer and you say, I work with the smart home industry or custom integration industry. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? If they're really unfamiliar. And you go, like for audio, multi-room, like, and they'll go Sonos and they know that brand. Or, home security, like a Ring doorbell. These are the real brands of the, consumer sort of outside world. You add that to a Samsung or a Sony on the video side, and you've kind of got the brand names. And so you kind of want them to do well in their lanes, but I get where on the professional integration side, you need to kind of have a walled garden. You need to have it serviceable people you can talk to directly to get things, working.
Or maybe a little more control than you can ever possibly have dealing with Amazon. Because if Amazon wants to change a rule or drop a feature, it's gone, no matter what that does to your clients and your business as a result. I have a friend of mine who no longer talks to me about new features or services from Google because I immediately send him to killedbygoogle.com and ask him, can his business survive it being eliminated in 18 months to 2 years? Amazon's not that bad, but it's kind of astonishing how, something that's a huge deal to us is essentially that last little point of present side sell in terms of the overall revenue of the organization. And that's, to sort of reiterate what Henry said, I prefer that the people I'm buying from actually care about my business.
Yeah.
And just to extend, like my little rule isn't hard and fast. Amazon also acquired another outfit called Eero, which makes amazing Wi-Fi gear. I mean, so amazing. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like we all still listen to Michael Jackson's music, amazing, that kind of thing. And so Like, and so as a result, like it helps me sell remote managed services through Parasol. Um, and so that aligns. But the ring, I'm in direct conflict, but Eero actually helps with our remote managed services offerings.
I actually ran screaming from Eero as soon as Amazon bought it, but I had also at the time was doing running evaluations of about 11 different competing mesh systems, and Eero was neither the fastest nor the least expensive, so it wasn't a particularly painful thing for me to walk away from. They did a lot of smart things, but I was just like, Amazon already knows far too much about me. Oh, shifting gears. Funny article from Residential Systems, and Anthony Savona wrote, "Only the best. There's one thing that has not changed in this industry, and that is the wealthy's need to have the very best." Uh, if I were being a cruel former magazine editor, I might suggest that there was a business trip to look at Gilded Age mansions in Newport, and they were looking for a way to write it off. So they worked an angle in there talking about the Gilded Age obsessions with their seaside cottages, which, and if you can consider 70 odd rooms over an acre, built with the finest materials available, a cottage. You're living a different life than I am, and I'm happy for you. But it suggests that, much like the Vanderbilts and the other Gilded Age barons, people today want to demonstrate their wealth. And that is good, I assume, for the residential industry. Um, did this resonate with either one of you? Because I always have a complicated feeling about this because I have a friend who got very deep into, sort of audio gear. And he went out and spent a staggering amount of money. And he spent a staggering amount of money on things like cables and a DAC. I mean, he spent car money on a DAC and a set of speakers. Well, I will say are euphonic in terms of their sound presentation, not necessarily accurate. Um, you know, is is the best, where do you guys see people posting residential? Because obviously we've just, Jeremy just pointed out that a lot of people don't really think of residential integrations at all unless they're at a certain financial point, although we're seeing here in the United States certainly a lot of cases where developers are bringing in all sorts of goodies on the home automation front to make their properties more attractive. But how do you guys feel about this? Do people really want the best? Do they want the best experience? Do they want the best products? Do they just want to demonstrate that they spent a spectacular amount of money on a home theater? Um, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Henry's probably, even though I would say in your market, Henry, you're probably in a more kind of conservative place where people aren't ostentatious about their spending on their home gear. You go to somewhere on one of the you know the bigger city areas, maybe like LA, Miami, New York. There, it's about more of the show. I don't know if quality is always the answer as much as it is, having a brand or saying that they spent this amount of money. Like you said, it's kind of like bragging rights more than anything. There is a case to be made for um, not so much show off as I want it to work. And you look at how there's the
Right.
trend toward lighting fixtures in our industry, and having a a home where it's enormous to go around and close all of the blinds manually of a home would be ridiculous. So to have something automated to simplify your life, you want to pay for that and uh, have better quality lighting than is typically available in a production home. You want to pay for that, and you're working with a designer who understands that aesthetic value. And so I think there's some of that to be made, point to be made on that. But I think what the breakers in Rhode Island is kind of like solving a problem. The house burned down, and so they had to build a boiler underground, away from the home, and this is something that would be horribly expensive for your average homeowner during the Gilded Age, but the wealthy can do that. I think that's kind of what Tony was sort of saying about this. But yeah, point made that it's not always about the quality. Sometimes it's just about the spending money because you've got it. You don't have anything else. You've spent it on everything else, so let's do it on this too.
I wonder if it just doesn't come back down to time and the passage of time. I feel like with our wealthy clients, they're acutely aware of time being the most precious resource, and they don't want to waste any of it. And if they think for a second there's a better deal, or a more, and you can see this play out in an aircraft, right? I mean, there's economy, premium economy, first class, right? So, and oftentimes our clients are, reluctantly flying first class. They'd rather be in a jet. Um, they are, I think misery is often comparative. So I think a lot of times it has to do with like the feeling, and a lot of this is just straight up feeling, right? Like I've heard it described as like, you know, our basal ganglia communicates to us in feelings versus thoughts. And so we feel certain ways. So maybe we go over to our buddy's house, and our buddy has a cold plunge, or our buddy has a racquetball court or a cool theater or some cool experience that made us feel this certain way. We want that. It's like that scene in Napoleon Dynamite, right? Where
Right.
he's showing off the Tupperware and the ship and the bottle, and the wife's like, I want that. And so when they get to that point where they want that, that's to them is the best, only to be unseated by the buddy when the buddy comes over and goes, oh, and proudly showing off the new whatever Okama Game Sphere or whatever. Oh, you got that, and that can instantly be undone. And I've seen it happen where the buddy goes, well, I have this, and so I think it's super relative, super comparative, super slippery, and I think again to your point, Jeremy, has a lot to do with ostentation versus like this term stealth wealth. I hear a lot, like the acquisition of sort of well-made things, or I talked to a tailor who makes jackets that are made out of I don't know, some sort of like bespoke Angoran wool of like sheep who are read to every night or something. I mean, like, so this notion of well-made things as being the best, that shifts. It's very cultural, super feeling oriented. But I don't think there's anybody, doesn't matter whether you're wealthy or whatever, wherever you're lying in life, you're always trying to kind of muscle up. I mean, this is Orwellian stuff, right? The low, the middle, and the high, right? Like if you're part of the low, you're trying to get to the middle. If you're part of the middle, you're trying to get to the high. If you're part of the high, you're trying to say, no, we're all full up here. So I think that notion of the best is universal. We all want the best. We all want to feel like that. So it resonated with me. And I think those of us who are in the world of selling things to the ultra high net worth and the wealthy would do well to remember that psychological construct and understand the pain points and the motivations of whoever it is we're talking to. Because if we don't, we could be in real danger.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's man, I'm going to drive Mitchell, our producer, crazy. But speaking of real danger, there's the existential crisis of losing high-end market, and there's the existential crisis of dealing with a hurricane and its impact on your business. CEO Pro, CE Pro, sorry, not CEO Pro. Reading is hard. Did a pretty thoughtful article trying to put together resources for people whose businesses were impacted. And if you search for relief resources for integrators impacted by hurricanes at CE Pro's website, you will find basically a gigantic list of resources for Helene and Milton. As somebody who's worked a lot with data and data preservation, and both on the natural disaster and the security side. I will say three quick thoughts. One, wherever you live, you can have a disaster. And if you live in the place that doesn't have earthquakes and hurricanes and floods, you can still have your place burned out. So, having copies of your data and having copies of that off-site is critical for your long-term emotional, if not financial, survival. But again, they have information for North Carolina business owners impacted by Hurricane Helene. They have information for Hurricane Milton in Florida. And if you have been impacted by these, we hope you are safe, your family is safe, your people are safe, and that you can get back up on your feet and get things moving as quickly as possible, because hurricanes do damage, floods are worse, and I hope everybody listening never has to go through either one of those, or an earthquake or a wildfire, having had friends and family go through any of all of these in various different places. And also, disaster, being ready for a disaster is not for people over there. It's happening pretty much anywhere. Anything can burn to the ground. So just a cheerful thought to move that one on there. Jeremy, Henry, any last thoughts on the residential side of things before we wrap up this episode of ResiWeek? Anything that's compelling, got you thinking about any products you're excited about?
Well, I'm headed off to the HTSA fall conference this week to basically network with some folks. I know that's not the one Henry's a part of. You're a ProSource guy, but this is the only one I'm able to hit this fall due to scheduling challenges. But it's always just great to reconnect in person with some guys and gals in the industry who are doing this work and get some good stories and get some connections for future conversations like this kind of a environment. So I'm looking forward to that. Headed to back to the Denver area where I was just a month ago for CEDIA.
My buddy Chris Sturley will be giving a breakout talk at that HTSA event. So a little plug, Chris Sturley from Las Vegas, doing a great job out there.
I'll check that out. Looking forward to it. Yeah, he's a really, really sharp guy.
Jeremy, what's the best place for listeners to catch up with you online?
Our website's restechtoday.com, and you can subscribe to the print or digital magazine there and our podcast and our newsletter. So I encourage you just to go there or find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Glowacki.
Henry, and folks want to track you down?
Absolutely. Online at Get Livewire, and send me an email or a text or carrier pigeon. And I love talking about our industry. So bring it on.
All right. Jeremy, Henry, thank you so much for making the time for ResiWeek this week. I'm Patrick Norton. Matt will be back. Sorry, Mitchell. In 3, 2. Jeremy, Henry, thank you so much for joining me on ResiWeek this week. I'm Patrick Norton. Matt will be back next week hosting, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.